Hey everybody, Lawrence here with 30 Basic Terrain coming at you with another one. Okay, quite a few years ago, HeroClix had this line of horror clicks. And in this line of horror clicks, they did out like some special chase figures or whatever, zombie versions of the Wizard of Oz characters. Well, I managed to get a hold of these, mainly through eBay. And I got them, gave them to my sister for Christmas because she's a giant Wizard of Oz fan. Well, this year she had asked me to make her a twisted Munchkin village to go with those figures. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing a whole village. I'll do you a house. She was like, okay. And that's when I realized she just conned me into making her a Munchkin house. But anyway, my whole basic idea of this is, what if Dorothy's house had missed the Wicked Witch of the East? And she got a little upset that someone tried to drop a house on her. And basically went on a complete and total rampage and destroyed Oz. Well, this is my version of what the Munchkin village wound up looking like. Or, well, at least two of the houses. So, before I get into the how-to I got to this point, I want to give a big shout out to my two patrons, Dungeon Matron and Coro. Your guys' help and support of the channel is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much. Well, let's get to it. I've already cut out several circular sections of various sizes with my 3-inch thick foam here. But right now I'm cutting out a conical section because all the roofs I found are either conical or half circles. Now for this section here, it's going to be a second floor, and 3 inches is just too much. I figured I'm going to go with a 2-inch high section, so I need to trim off an inch. I was going to cut down the first floor a little bit, but it was just too big. No, I don't want to go with a conical. I want to go more with a dome shape for the roofs. So I'm just working it way down to where it's actually going to be easier just to shave it with a offal blade. At least that's my thought process here. I'm not completely decided at this point. Just test fitting different things out, ramming through some ideas in my head, just trying to figure out exactly what I want to do at this point. Here I'm just filling up the crack or indentation with hot glue that was made from when I cut this original circle out. And here I'm just basically assembling the substructure of the building. I haven't quite completely made up my mind up until this point how I wanted it, the final look to be. Kind of test fitting pieces first, and then gonna hot glue the roof to the second story here. The second and the first floor have already been glued together. But pretty simple, quick and easy. And I finally decided I wanted the roof to have a spherical look to it, so I'm just taking my offal knife and trimming it away to get a rough, rounded look. And as you can see here, I took some sandpaper and I smoothed it over to get made it as spherical as possible. Up until this point, my intentions were only to do one house. Then I was looking at all these leftover offcut bits from the main house, and I was like, I can make a second house out of this. A smaller one, yes, but I can make a second house, so I figured, why not? So I test fitted a couple of pieces and just started hot gluing stuff together, and I was like, yeah, this is going to work. So, again, grabbed my hot glue gun and just started gluing the pieces together, and the final result is a second, smaller house. All from offcuts from the main building. of course, here's the substructures for both buildings. And here I'm grabbing a bunch of thin strips I had cut up a long time ago and just texturing up with my grout brush right there. And start adding to some timber work to the buildings. Of course, I'm putting it right across the seam because great way to cover it up. And basically, I'm just placing timber framing wherever I think it looks good. Now with all this timber framing that I'm doing, I'm going to have lots of small, short offcuts that won't do for the framing, maybe for some support beams or diagonal beams, whatever they're called. But the smaller pieces that aren't usable for the main part will be usable for the next step. Now I'm using some graphics medium chipboard here, and I'm getting ready to measure out for the backs of the doors. These doors, I think I measured them 1 inch wide, maybe an inch wide, maybe? Yeah, an inch wide, and just cut it open. And now the height of the door, I think I only measured that 2 inches high. I went a little shorter because, well, these doors are for Munchkins, not standard, not humans or any other type of creature. So I definitely wanted the doors to be smaller. But again, this is just backs of the door I'm cutting out. Wasn't exactly sure how many doors I was going to make, so I just cut out whatever I could. Now here I'm using some Railings tacky glue, and I'm just slathering it on to one side of the backs of the door. And I'm using those offcuts from the timber framing to do the individual slats for the doors. And that is why I told you to save the offcuts from when you do the timber framing. You'll have a use for them. Now the glue is dried, I trimmed off all the overhang, and I'm going to grab my grout brush and give it a little extra texture to the doors. And I'm going to grab the pencil to accentuate the in between each plank, just to make it pop a little bit more for when you eventually paint it. Now here I'm starting the support railings for the second floor of the main building, and I cut these pieces of foam out a long time ago. When I cut stuff out, I cut a lot, and then I have it for later. And I'm texturing it again to give it a wood grain appearance using my grout brush here. And now these are the supports for the railing itself, and I want to cut them in 1/2 inch segments. And I'm going to need a lot of them. And of course, now I'm actually putting all these support for the railings on the side. I'm just dipping it in some tacky glue and then placing it along however it should be. Now, another step you may want to take is put some toothpicks through to give it some extra support, or even some pins or something to give it a better grip and durability if you're going to be using something like this in a game. Once this piece is done, it's going to go in a display cabinet and never leave, so I did not worry about it for this project. Of course, again, I'm grabbing the square long pieces that I had made a long time ago again, and I'm using a tinfoil ball to texture it up to look like stone. I honestly don't know why I wanted it to look like stone. It just seemed like a good idea at the time, because these are going to be for the doorways. Now I just need to place it around where the door is already glued to the buildings and glue it down. I mean, it's pretty simple. And of course, after I've glued it down, I'll texture the edges where I cut a little bit more just to look at it a little better. But pretty quick, pretty simple. Now I'm using some of that thin strips I have and texturing up to look like wood. And I'm going to start placing on the railing for the second floor. It's a pretty simple process. Just put a little dab of super glue on the support, or not super glue, but Aleene's tacky glue on the supports. And then I will place down the railing itself. Now, if you use stuff like white glue for this, you're going to need to use some pins to hold it in place because you're bending it. XPS does bend if it's thin without any problem, but it does need to be held in place, so I use the pins. Could you use hot glue? Yeah, you could, but for some reason in my head I went with some simple PVA or tacky glue for this. Now here, as you can see, the railing itself is on all the supports. Just wait for the glue to dry. Unfortunately, I lost the footage of where after I pulled the pins, I roughed it up and just made the railings look broken and beat up and all nasty looking. Because this house has gone through hell, so it's got to look really bad. And of course, now I'm adding my homemade texture paste to the walls just because I wanted the stucco look. But I'm not going for like smooth or nice. I'm just going for a nasty, gnarly, ugly look. And that's why you see so many bumps and waves and whatnot. Pretty simple, just get it all on the flat areas of the walls, in between all the timber framing that I've put up and the walls. And you can see the little extra piece I hung out there. And of course, round windows, which I cut out of XPS. But pretty quick. It's not a hard process. Just basically, I'm using a flat brush and brushing it on wherever it needs to go. Time to work on the roofs. Now here I'm using some milliput, but every single source picture I could find of a Munchkin house had thatch roofing. Well, I personally don't like the look of teddy bear fur, and I really didn't feel like doing the cord method. So I decided to give milliput a try. Now I'm just mixing each row up individually, and then I'll use some blades to texture it to look like thatch. In the end, it actually wound up looking good, but honestly, I would probably go with another method because having to wait for the previous layer to dry or cure was a bit of a pain in the butt. But I do one row on one building, go to the other building and do that, so at least I wasn't completely wasting time. Time to work on the yellow brick road. Here I'm using some vinyl road pattern that I got from the Dollar Tree last year. These weren't evenly cut, so I was like, well, I need to fix that and get a nice even straight cut on the vinyl roads. Whoa! Camera problem. And right now, I just want to figure out exactly where I want the road to finally sit. I didn't want to go straight and up here. Yeah, this will look good. The angle pattern will look good. And as you can see, I've also traced out where the houses themselves are going to go. Now, I'm just scoring up the foam itself to give more something for the glue to actually grip onto that I'm going to use. Because this is a flat, smooth surface, so the glue needs something to grip onto, and I don't want this road to peel off. Now I'm going to put down a boatload of wood glue. Why did I use wood glue? I have no idea. Oh wait, it was within reach. I'm just basically going to put down a nice, thick, nasty layer of it. Brush it out so it covers the whole area that I have marked off for where the road's going to go. This is a pretty simple way of doing it, and it wound up working in the end for me, so I wasn't going to complain. Now that the glue's down, let's actually apply this vinyl brick pattern thingamabobber. Now, this can be a pain in the butt somewhat, so because I didn't take the time to actually flatten out the vinyl, because it was packaged in a like rolled up fold almost, so thinking, well, I'm going to have to put something on here to hold it down flat, because where it was folded it was just starting to come up and it was getting a little frustrating. Like, well, I'm going to have to put something on top of this to hold it down overnight. I was like, hey, I have this piece of foam. I can put heavy weights on this top piece of foam. Of course, I wind up grabbing some clips that I have off to the side there, and I'm just going to clamp it down for overnight to dry. And it wound up working. Well, the base itself was completely flattened. I didn't want that, so I'm going to mix up some Sculptamold here, add a little browning to it, just to dye it, being a force of habit because I'm thinking in gaming terms at this minute. In case of like if the paint job or grass chips, you won't be staring at white Sculptamold, you'll have brown, so it won't be as noticeable. But again, this is just to add a little variations and to get rid of that complete flatness of the base. And here I'm going to use my homemade texture paste again and use it everywhere on the base itself that's not yellow brick road. Because again, I don't want completely and perfectly flat, just to give it some texture. And here I primed it with some black Mod Podge. And then I went and did a zenithal highlight on everything but the road itself. And of course now I'm going to start painting. First I'm going to do the dirt areas. I'm going to use a standard triad, a dark brown, a mid-tone, and a highlight. And this is the dark tone. And of course now I'm going to actually start working on the mid-tone on all the dirt areas. It's basically an overbrush, like 85% coverage, leaving the deepest, darkest recesses alone. And of course now I'm doing the highlight, which is just, I'm using a makeup brush to do a quick dry brush on all the dirt areas with a really light brown for a highlight. And here I'm doing the same process that I did on the dirt to all the stucco areas. This is going to be a process that I repeat. Basically, I use a triad, I use a dark, a mid-tone, and a highlight depending on what the final product is going to be. And now I'm going to work on the mid-tone on the stucco. Again, it's a mid-tone of like a beige, tan, just to get to where I want it to be. 85% coverage for this step here. And now I'm doing a quick highlight dry brush with my lightest beige tan color. Sorry for the crappy camera angle, but you know the drill. And of course now I gotta paint the thatch roofing. For this I went with like a nasty brownish green because I don't want it to look pretty, honestly, because this is twisted Munchkin housing, not pretty. So again, this is a custom like swamp color I use, but basically a nasty, dirty, brownish green. Of course, now I'm doing an overbrush with my mid-tone swamp color. Just again, leaving the deepest dark. You want the dark color to stay in the shadows and have this basically cover everything else. And now I'm doing a quick highlight dry brush with my light green swamp color thingamabob. I said I just wanted this thatch roofing to look nasty and old, and I figured the swamp green that I usually use would be a good choice. And with the final product, I was really happy with it. Now all the timber framing. Now, regardless of what color you want to use for your timber framing and timber work, again, I'm going with a triad, basically a dark base color, a mid-tone, and then a quick dry brush highlight. For one building, I went with a green theme, and the other building I went with a blue theme. I like blue. And as you can see here, I got all the base color down, and in the mid-tone overbrushing, which is basically, again, like a 80-85% coverage. Just basically leave the dark deepest recesses alone. And of course now I'm doing the highlight dry brush of either the green or the blue on anything that requires wood, anything that's wood. Like on the green one, I'll use my light green. On the blue areas, I'll use light blue. Now I've already done the base color on this, which was true ochre, and now I'm going from a mid-tone yellow color for the yellow brick road, which is a saffron yellow. Just basically, again, overbrush, dark, medium, light. And right now this is the medium phase. Of course, here I'm just going to do a quick highlight dry brush using a yellow light color. And again, this is real light, just catch the edges. Dry brush with a really soft, like makeup brush. It's what I prefer to use. And here I am just coating everything with a dark brown wash. You know, I'm just showing you the building right now, but the entire thing. Both buildings, ground, even the yellow brick road gets this dark brown wash. This is to dinge it up and make it look dirty and just kind of nasty, grimy. Now that the wash is dry, I'm going to go over everything and give it a final highlight dry brush with whatever the final color was for that area. The darkest light brown, the stucco, the thatch roofing, the woodwork, everything will get whatever the final highlight color was. Now here, I'm actually starting to add some flocking. I'm using some 50/50 watered down PVA glue. And just basically brush it along to wherever I know I'm going to be putting flocking. I'm going to do this in sections, not the whole thing all at one shot, just to make it easier. At least for me, it's easier to do it this way. And first I'm using an earth color. I'm using Woodland Scenics Fine Turf. I'm just sprinkling it on. Not going for solid coverage, but just to get that dark color underneath. And next I'm going to use some burnt grass. It's a green color. It'll actually make it look like grass. And then I'm going to go with some yellow grass for some highlight around edges where the sunlight might hit it or dry out the grass. And here I'm just adding spots of really tall grass that I pre-made. I'm using basically a sculpting tool that's basically a sharp point, and I make a hole in the bottom, dip the bottom of the tall tufts into some tacky glue, and insert it into the hole I just made. Pretty quick and simple. And here I'm just adding some standard sized grass tufts that anywhere it makes sense. Dip them in some tacky glue and place them where I think it looks good. And here are some skeleton bone piles that were 3D printed. I painted them up real quick, and now I'm just basically super gluing in place to where, again, I think they will look good. And here I want to make a spider eggs nest. I'm getting some 5-minute epoxy that I got at Dollar Tree, just a little small, like 0.2 ounce tube. And as always, these things are stubborn and pain in the butt to get out. But I'm going to add an equal amount of rubbing alcohol, a few drops of some translucent green ink, stir it up till it actually starts getting a silver tone. That means it's actually starting to work. By adding and I'm going to add a few of these foam balls yellow foam balls that I actually got at Dollar Tree as well. By adding the alcohol, it makes the 5-minute epoxy much more flowable. It'll just pour out and go wherever it can go. Of course, using a popsicle stick here to actually tease it out a little bit and get it to a point where I think it will look good. And of course, using some of my homemade moss paste, which is basically just a mix of some flocking and some tacky glue. But again, I'm just placing it in small amounts where, cracks and crevices or anywhere that it makes sense for moss may have grown over time. Also, I'm going to use it to basically hide some flaws and mistakes that I made, like along the edge of the yellow brick road there, where the soil didn't quite match up with the vinyl road. Great way to cover up mistakes. And once I got all the moss down that I want, I'm going to use some fine turf yellow grass to basically sprinkle a little bit on to give it some contrast and color, but almost like a highlight. Okay, here I'm using some stretched out used dryer sheets. They make perfect spider webs to basically spread out and place spider webs wherever I want. And then I'm using the watered down 50/50 PVA glue to basically glue it down in place. Just using a brush to attach it around the edges of where the spider web is making contact with something, which will more than hold it in place. Stretch it in between the buildings, along the ground, from the building, and anywhere that I think, yeah, that's a good spot, or yeah, that'll look cool. Basically, anywhere I feel like putting a spider web. The one drawback to doing the stretched out dryer sheet for spider webs is they are very delicate and weak. A way you can strengthen them is the way I do it is I use some matte sealer through my airbrush and just basically hit all the spider webs with a coating of matte sealer. It stiffens them up, makes them a little bit stronger, and it will last longer this way. And I've painted up a bunch of cheap Halloween decoration spiders, some spider confetti, and just some toy spiders to have a green emerald appearance. Basically, I've been calling these emerald spiders and attaching them anywhere that I think will make a good spot for a spider around, basically anywhere around where there's webbing. Well, the build itself is done, but I was looking at the sides there, and I was like, yes, I need to do something with it. So I started off with basically a coat of jet black paint and painted the whole edge. I mean, it was already black from the Mod Podge, but I wanted it to be a dark, dark black. So jet black it was. I had this spider web like floral stuff that I got from the Dollar Tree a long time ago. And I was like, that'll make a good decoration for the sides. So I'm basically slathering on a nice thick coat of Alien's tacky glue, and I am going to attach it to the sides. Once it's dry, I can trim it up, and it'll wind up looking cool. At least I think it will. It did. Now, I was having trouble getting it to actually stay, so I wound up using some pins to hold it in place. And while it doesn't show in the recording, once it actually did dry, just to double secure it, I took a layer of plain matte Mod Podge and just coated the top layer over top of the cloth webbing stuff and sealed it in place so it won't fall off. I've got to say I'm actually really happy with how this turned out in the end. It matches the miniatures. While I personally am not a Wizard of Oz fan, my sister is. Once she gets this, I hope she likes it. Hey everybody, if you made it this far, it means you watched to the end, and as always, I greatly appreciate that. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. If you want to see more, click subscribe. If you want to get notified of when I upload a new video, hit the bell notification icon. If you want to leave a comment down below. If you want to get directly in contact with me, come to the Discord. I do upload pics as often as I can of in progress pics of whatever video or project I'm currently working on. So come to the Discord, you get sneak peeks of the next video. Well, as always, guys, I appreciate you, and thank you for every subscriber I got, anyone who's viewing, you guys too. Well, as always, guys, remember, when you're making your terrain, the only person you got to worry about is you, because it is your terrain.